Hello and welcome to Living in Chicago, the podcast where I get to interview real Chicagoans about the neighborhoods that they live, work, and play in. My name is Jake Lyons. I'll be your host, and in this episode, I interview August Spree about what it's like to live in the Andersonville neighborhood. We talk a little bit about Andersonville and Uptown because she's kind of in a tweener area that's not quite either of them. Technically, it would be Uptown, but she spends a lot of her time in Andersonville, and we talk about a lot of different neighborhoods and just the lifestyle of Chicago. And it's a wide ranging, really interesting, really good conversation in a lot of different ways. And I look forward to you guys hearing it and hearing what you guys think of it. Real quick, if you are not familiar with Andersonville, which is the neighborhood that we spend the majority of time talking about, I would say, as far as the neighborhoods that we actually do talk about, it is a subsection of the Edgewater community area. So there's 77 community areas in Chicago, but each of those community areas may have more neighborhoods within it. So this would be a neighborhood that is within the Edgewater community area. And it is located just due north, pretty much. If you're starting from downtown Chicago in the Loop, you just get on the Lakeshore Drive and go up 5 or 6 miles, get off on Foster Avenue or Highway 41, as you might know it, and go not even a few blocks, and you are pretty much in Andersonville. So it's as the term Edgewater, its parent neighborhood Edgewater might entail, it is right by the lake. So you have a really cool beach right there, Foster Beach. Hollywood Beach isn't too far as well. So, and don't sleep on Chicago beaches, y'all, because I mean, it's in the middle of summer. I'm telling you, if somebody just blindfolded you and put you on one of the beaches here in Chicago, I hope that doesn't actually happen. But if it did, and it were consensual, I think you would, and somebody that's told you like, yeah, this is the coast of Florida somewhere, you would be like, yeah, okay, I'm in Florida. That's cool. The beach scene here in Chicago really is pretty great in the summer, but that's neither here nor there. Andersonville starts at Foster Avenue, goes up. It's a pretty small area, actually. Andersonville itself is. It goes about as far east as Broadway before it turns into Ridge Avenue. Goes about as far east as Ravenswood Avenue, which I've talked before is kind of a street that doesn't really feel like a street, feels like kind of more of a parking lot or an alley because there's a train line going right through the middle of it. But nonetheless, that is the dividing line before you get to the Rose Hill Cemetery, which is huge on the other side of it. And then the north goes as far north as Victoria Street, according to Google Maps, which is kind of a random place to end it. But the whole area really isn't very big at all. As far as what is it like, let's hear from August about what actually living in this neighborhood is like. All right, here joined today by August Spree. She is a veteran of the nonprofit event planning and public speaking. I would say it's not a circuit, but that's definitely the realm that she has been in for quite some time here in the Chicago area. August, hey, how are you?
Hi, thanks for having me.
Absolutely, thank you so much for coming on, and I look forward to getting into whatever we get into. So you've been in the Uptown kind of Buena Park adjacent, Andersonville adjacent area. How long have you been there?
I've been here for 2 years. So I lived in Chicago
Okay.
for um, more than a decade, and then I left and went to Detroit for a little bit, and then came back home. Because Chicago, I love Chicago.
Where are you from originally?
Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Pittsburgh. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And so cool. Let's just I guess rewind to that point. What brought you to Chicago to begin with?
Okay. So I did like an internship. I was working with an organization. And at the time, I was really involved with dance. So I had become a dance instructor, and we were working with troubled youth, people who were, maybe getting off of drugs or had troubled homes, things like that. And we had an arts program for them, which included dance. And I was in charge of the dance portion. And I came here to work with the organization because I was young and able to go wherever. And I thought, okay, yeah, I'll go see what that's like, have a little adventure, be there for like 6 months, maybe a year, and then see where life takes me. And then fast forward, and it was like 19 years before I had left.
Yeah, before you went to Detroit and then
Yeah.
promptly came back.
Yeah.
Gotcha. So you grew up in Pittsburgh. You were there what through high school, through college, and then came.
Through high school, and then I did an internship
Okay,
in like the southern states in Oklahoma. Did not enjoy my time in Oklahoma. I mean, the art scene is very cool there, but then yeah, from there, so I came here via Oklahoma.
gotcha. Forgive me for presuming college kids. You don't have to go to college. There's plenty of ways to
Yeah,
get through
yeah.
this whole life thing. um, okay, cool. And what? So coming from Pittsburgh, um, I would assume growing up there, you're probably a little bit like East Coast biased, right? Like if you're thinking of any big cities, you're probably thinking obviously like Philadelphia or like Boston, or of course, obviously New York, places like that. What would you say that's true, or what
um,
about Chicago seemed a little different?
yeah, for me, Pittsburgh never felt like a fit. So Pittsburgh being very different because Pennsylvania is a very wide state, and Pittsburgh
Yeah,
is on the Ohio border, whereas Philly is over closer to New York and the coast over there.
fair enough.
Um, so they're on opposite ends of the state. They're like 8 hours apart, and they
Okay.
have very different vibes. Pittsburgh is very old. Pennsylvania is one of the original 13 and all that stuff, and um, so I guess, yeah, it is more of an East Coast vibe, but I do think it's definitely very different from a Philly or New York. I love
Hmm.
Philly and New York. They they've just grown with the times, let's say. So, like as a woman of color, um, places that I've lived resonate differently for me in different
Hmm.
ways, maybe than just someone who isn't a female or a person of color.
Hmm.
So in that way, I think Pittsburgh felt limiting to me. And from a very young age, I was like, okay, I'm going to have to go somewhere. I'm going to have to go somewhere else to find like my
Hmm.
place. And,
Hmm.
and yeah, and I always did believe that there was a place on this planet for everyone to feel like a place where you click energetically and to feel the most yourself and the most alive. And I wouldn't say at the time that I came to Chicago, I had already traveled to 2 or 3 other countries, and I was sort of exploring my way through life and planned to do that. Um, I had also been to, let's see, by the time I came to Chicago, I had been to 30 something states.
Wow.
So I did a significant amount
That
of,
at a pretty young age too, right? That's
yeah.
that's getting around. What were you doing that had you visiting so many places?
No, I was so privileged because I was involved with dance. And in
Uh-huh.
the company, it was like traveling. So for most of the year, we would travel and do different festivals and different shows and different things like that. And
Mm.
so I really was very like blessed in that opportunity to experience that at such a young age. I highly
Hmm.
recommend it for anyone because you get to know so many people, and obviously the team that I was with, like we were tighter than ever, and some of them 30 years later are still my best friends and stuff. So
Yeah.
yeah, so I had had that chance, and so that's why I didn't think I'd be putting down any roots when I came to Chicago, and it just worked. At first, I was in the suburbs. I
Hmm.
think that's important to say because people are always like, "Where are you from?" Chicago, and then they'll be like, "Arlington Heights," and you're like, "That's not
Hmm.
Chicago," you know. Um,
Yeah.
but I always had like for the first few years, I had aspirations of moving to the city, and I always had people assume I was from the city. I'd go places and they'd be like, "Do you live in Chicago? It seems like you're a city person," and I was like, "Thank you, I feel it too," you know. So when I finally
Hmm.
did. moved to the city, I was like in Ukrainian Village
Yep.
area, and just I just feel like I sort of like inside myself, I was just like, it was like an exhale, like this is my vibe, you know?
What about it do you think appealed to you most? If you could kind of dissect just the different aspects of city life that you vibed with and felt most at home with.
Yeah. I love that in the city, people, which I know some people say the opposite, but I feel like people are friendly. You're
Hmm.
around so many people, like a lot, from like walking or taking public transit or just everything is closer. So I just felt like I engaged in conversations much easier,
Hmm.
than when I was in the suburbs and people seem to be in their own little capsules.
Hmm.
I also appreciate, again, going back to being a woman of color, just the diversity of it. Like I've always lived in neighborhoods that have been incredibly diverse, from
Hmm.
languages spoken to how, people's appearances and gender identities. And just like, I really appreciate that because if if there's someone walking down the street with like a beard in like a sequin dress and like just expressing themselves in the full way that they want to, then I feel like I'm allowed to do that too. You know what I mean? So it's just sort of
Hmm.
that ability to be whoever you want to be in that moment. I just feel like in my experience I've seen that more in the city than I have in the suburbs, where it's more like you're expected to sort of conform.
Certainly. Yeah, that would definitely, in my experience as well, for sure be true. Yeah, I would say, coming, because I'm from Indianapolis originally, and that's, probably most of Indianapolis is probably pretty comparable to like a suburb of, most of the suburbs of Chicago. I mean, Indy's a pretty big city in its own right, but,
Mhm.
most of it is pretty suburban in nature, so I can definitely relate to like in Arlington Heights, Naperville, Schaumburg. Like I've never lived in those places, but I have a pretty good idea what living in those places would look and feel like. So like yeah, I think coming from kind of like a more conservative background, I know a lot of people are more likely to, or they say like, oh, you go to like a liberal college or you move to, quote unquote, like a liberal city and you become
Yeah.
liberal, you change, your values go away, whatever, insert whatever,
Yeah.
stupidity here. And it's like, that's really
Oh
not what's
no.
going on. Yeah.
No.
To me, it was just like, well, you're exposed to all these people who on the surface are different from you, and you're forced to reckon with the fact that like these people are not your enemy.
Yeah,
These are just
exactly.
normal people, like having, living the same kinds of um dealing with the same things you are, in
Yeah.
every kind of way, in a lot of ways. And it's
Mhm.
just like, yeah, that it's just like such a good growth experience kind of thing,
I
you know.
agree. I think, I did come from a very conservative background in Pittsburgh, and being out on my own at first, it was like, "This is gonna really date me."
Oh
Very much
no.
so. But I remember, like, the first goth person that I came across,
Mm,
because I graduated high school in 1993, so full
okay.
on Gen Xer, but like I had not been exposed to like various gender identities or even anyone in the LGBTQ community. I mean, actually, I was, but I didn't realize at the time because people were kind of keeping it under wraps and all of that. So
Hmm.
um, I remember coming across like a goth person, and they were so beautiful and kind. And I didn't say, like, thankfully, I didn't put my foot in my mouth or say anything. And I don't consider myself like immediately to be a judgy type of person. So, but I realized once inside, I felt surprised by their kindness. I
Hmm.
had that moment where I was like, wait, why am I surprised by that? What did I expect? And that's when I started to realize, oh, I had this preconceived idea of the type of person who would dress that way. And
You thought you
it
were
was
going to be like a sacrifice to Satan as soon as you met them or something.
not necessarily, but I did expect them to be sort of like broody and grumpy and I don't
Yeah.
know. Like, so those experiences and then like moving forward and experiences with people in other, genres of being human. Um,
Yep.
I think you're exactly right. Like being in a city does force you to acknowledge that we're all here just like moving around trying to live our lives. And,
Hmm.
your neighbor hangs a flag and it's not my job to tell them, what kind of flag they can hang. Like it's just
Yep.
you're living your life and everybody has their own and let's just like let people be people.
Yeah, absolutely. So you were in Ukrainian Village for a time. Were you there pretty much until Detroit, or have you
Yeah.
what all areas? So it's pretty much just been Ukrainian Village and where you are now, or
Yeah.
was there a
I have friends
okay?
where I spent a lot of time. So I spent some time in Logan
Yeah.
Square. I spent some time
Hmm.
in North Lawndale and, things like that. But as far as living, yeah, Ukrainian Village and then here, I think this is my favorite so far, like
Yeah.
neighborhood. I'm always trying to get my friend. Well, they do. They come over here all the time. I used to hang out here when I lived in Ukrainian Village. I used to hang out in Andersonville. So
Hmm.
when I was looking to move back, and thinking about, okay, where would I like to live? I was really excited to find a spot that was so close.
Hendersonville is a hard place to get into. Speaking as a real estate agent, I can tell you, man, like places just don't come up for sale very often. I mean, no neighborhood is really like chock full of places to buy right now, but
Yeah,
Andersonville is like especially so. Like it's really really low inventory there. So
I
it's
know. Well, that's why I'm being on the edge of Uptown, I think is the benefit. So I can like walk over to Andersonville and all the stuff that's on Clark,
right.
but I'm right near Green Mill, which I used to always bring people to. Like anybody who came to visit me in Chicago,
Yep.
we made a night to go over to Green Mill. It's like an icon,
Yeah.
and that's a half a block from me, So I
Yeah.
feel like I'm getting the best. And then one of the best Ethiopian restaurants is right across from Green Mill, and people come from all
Demera.
over the city, yeah, to eat
Yeah, it's
there.
fantastic.
And I can just like
I think
stumble there. So
they have a little satellite set up now down in the timeout market, I
do
believe.
they? Oh, I
I
didn't
think
know that.
so.
That's fun.
Yeah. If I'm lying about that, I'll just take this part out of the podcast, but I'm pretty sure they have. I know there's
Yeah,
Ethiopian there, but it might not be Demera, but in any case, yeah.
yeah. Well, I
Yeah,
just
I
love it
actually
because I can
just
just
had,
stumble over there. Yeah. Okay.
yeah, yeah. I actually just had a guy on a previous episode. Shout out Chris Anderson. He was the manager of the Green Mill for 12 years, so we got to have a pretty cool conversations. It's about all the
Oh,
history with
that's
that,
cool.
the underground tunnels, the old Al Capone
Yeah,
tunnels, and all that. All that kind of that history.
totally.
Um, Green Mill is man, what's absolute gem. It's an
Yeah,
emerald
it is the oldest still operating speakeasy in the whole country.
in the whole country. Is that true?
Yeah, yeah.
Wow. I mean, yeah,
And
that would make sense because it's like a real, true, like every sense of the word, speakeasy. Like that
yeah,
was like pure prohibition era. Like that's what that
totally.
place was.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it existed, I believe, a little bit before like Al Capone finally acquired it. And
Mm,
then and then I think, from his time period is kind of what put it on the map, so to speak. And I love
right.
that they haven't changed it, like the carved wood
Yep.
inside and the lights outside. Like you can just picture, like people pulling up in their like flappers,
Hmm.
gear and sparkles and stuff like that. And the Riviera is right there, the theater. So
Yeah.
this was
Pulling
the
up in their
theater
like
district.
Model Ts,
Yeah, I love it.
something like
So
that.
this was like the theater district, this is where people came to hang out in that time period. And there was the Green Mill and there was the Riviera, and like this was the place to be seen. So
Yep.
I love it. And there's a really cool
Yeah.
cemetery, which I know is like a weird thing to talk about, but I think cemeteries are beautiful. I like to stroll through them when the weather's
Hmm.
nice because it's very
Yeah.
quiet and in the middle of the city. It's just
Pristinely kept grounds. I mean, yeah.
yeah,
So cemeteries are nice. It's a
I
nice.
know.
I see. I can at least see where you're going with that for sure. Yeah.
I know. I know some people think I always say to my friends though, I'm like, no, it's creepy. I'm like, ghosts don't hang out in cemeteries, okay? If they're roaming, they're not gonna hang out with other dead people. They're trying to go like they're not here.
Right.
Just like
You're not going
anyways.
there in the middle of the night. That
Yeah.
maybe that might change things a little bit, but even then, I don't know.
I don't know. It doesn't freak me out. So, that's like it to me, it just feels like a peaceful slice of nature sort of in the middle of all of the city stuff. So,
Yeah. The classic real estate agent joke about living next to a cemetery is like, well, you get quiet neighbors.
I know. I know.
Yeah.
When I walked through here the first time, she was like, "Okay, so in the back there's an alley, but then on the other side of the alley there's a cemetery." But I think it's like, and she was trying to justify it and like convince me, and I was like, "Oh, I have no problem with that. I think it's awesome. It is very quiet."
Yeah.
So
Hmm.
yeah.
What do you like most about the Andersonville neighborhood specifically?
Oh, um, I love walking up and down Clark. Like,
Yep.
well, I should say I really, really love that it is so LGBTQ friendly.
Hmm.
And there's just flags everywhere. I had uh, a kid that I've known for quite some time who was coming to visit me and has grown up in an area that is, and they're queer, and they grew up in an area that is just not okay, and couldn't wait to graduate high school so that they could at least like not deal with being ridiculed. And so we planned a whole day and walked around and did some shopping and grabbed lunch. And their first comment was like, as we're walking down, was like, "There's a lot of rainbow flags." And I was like, "Oh yeah, this is a very like queer friendly area. And a lot of the businesses are owned by, people from the community." And they were just like, "But like a lot." And I was like, "Yeah, it's like, how does that feel? Like, is that weird to you?" Or and they were just like, "No, it feels great," and it was like it kind of
Hmm.
feels like an exhale. And that's going back to
Mm.
what I said before. When you're in an area where people are being like, even though I myself am not queer and I am cisgender, it's just like if you're in an area where people are free to be themselves, it it gives me more comfort that I can be myself. Because I've lived in
Hmm.
places where I can walk around and people are like surprised that there's a black person,
Mm.
I've had that. I've had all the comments and people putting their hands in my hair and like all the stuff. So it's just nice to like walk around and just not be noticed, honestly. Like
Hmm.
no one
Yeah.
cares. You know what I mean? So I like that the
Yeah.
most. Um Also, to be perfectly honest, as like a single female who's like moving around on my own a lot, I really enjoy the fact that a lot of the males are gay because
Hmm.
I feel a whole lot safer around gay men than I do around
That makes
straight.
sense. Yeah, it makes perfect sense. Yeah, that's why the like gay bars are so popular for bachelorette parties. I mean,
Yeah,
you can just go there, have a great time, and they're not going to get hit on. I mean, it makes perfect sense.
I know. I mean, not great for the dating life, but honestly, on a day to day, I appreciate it. And I make like a ritual once springtime, summer, and fall. I usually have a ritual where one day a week I'm walking through Andersonville. I'll just stroll, maybe get a coffee, maybe I shop around, maybe I don't, but it's just sort of like my walking like ritual just to get out, get some fresh air, and gotten to know some of the small business owners of the places that I love to pop in. And yeah, I
Yeah.
love it.
Andersonville definitely is just nothing but good vibes in my experiences there as well for all the reasons that you mentioned, and then just I mean even like going back like the old like Swedish history of it and stuff like
Oh,
that
yeah.
that it still holds on to at least a little bit, and just yeah, that whole strip across Clark Street is just I mean there's just so many things you can get into there. What are some
Hmm.
of your favorites? Like restaurants, bars, like eclectic shops and things. I mean, there's so many of them. Time for the Real Estate Stats Corner presented by me, Jake Lyons, real estate advisor here in the Chicago area with At Properties and my website, thechicagohomesource.com. In this segment, I'm going to give you 3 statistics about the Andersonville neighborhood that at least paint a broad picture of what real estate prices are looking like in this neighborhood right now. I do this because I think real estate prices are relevant to any discussion over any about any neighborhood, because after all, what really is a neighborhood without real estate, right? So to get into it, the three statistics that I will give you are the median sales price for a two-bed condo, the median sales price for a at least a three-bedroom house, and the median rental price for a two-bedroom apartment. So the first stat here, the median sales price for a two-bedroom condo in Andersonville as of December 2023, the most recent sales data that I have available to me of the recording of this, is $375,000. So 50% sold for more, 50% sold for less. $375,000 is the median sales price for a two-bedroom condo in Andersonville. If you want a house in Andersonville of at least three bedrooms, the median sales price for such a thing was $1.25 million. And if you want to rent a two-bedroom apartment, the median rental sales price on that would be $23.50. So there you have it. That is the Real Estate Stats Corner presented by the ChicagoHomeSource.com. If you want to see what all is available in the Andersonville area right now, or anywhere in Chicago for that matter, anywhere in the Chicagoland area, go to the ChicagoHomeSource.com. You can find that in the show notes.
I
That is
know.
hard to
Okay.
choose.
So I love, um, okay, so we're talking about Andersonville right now, but I already mentioned Green Mill, and Fat Cat is on
Mm-hmm.
that corner too. So that's technically uptown. So Fat Cat is one of my favorites. I can also stumble to. Um, I'm in Andersonville. I love Bar Roma for happy hour. They have a really great happy hour with these little like wine carafes, and Pizza Lobo is great for. I am not a Chicago pizza person. I know it's like sacrilege, but
Me neither.
having
I think most people, if given a lie detector test, I think most people are kind of on that same path. Like,
I
I
know
don't
it's
know. It's
true.
one of those things that's like we feel like we have to say it, but
Yeah,
nobody's really. Yeah,
I mean it's like a brick of cheese, right? I don't. Anyway,
it's absurd. It's
yeah,
ridiculous. Yeah, the only time we do it is if like somebody's coming into town who's
yes,
visits Chicago like for the first time ever, and they just want like the full like stereotypical Chicago thing. It's like, all right,
exactly.
that's fine. We'll do it. But there's much,
Yeah,
much, much better pizza all over the city that is not quote unquote Chicago style. But anyway, sorry to interrupt.
yeah, definitely agree. So Pizza Lobo is one of my faves. Um, Great cocktails, great pizza, and they have a huge patio. So I like going there with the family or whomever else because you can just kind of sit outside and really enjoy, excuse me, the weather. Baya, which is like a Middle Eastern style. I think that's a
Faya,
great
yes. Hmm.
date night restaurant.
Some of the
Um,
best hummus. I'm a big hummus guy,
Me
and
too.
their hummus samplers there are the best.
So
It's the
good.
absolute best.
I could make
Yeah.
myself sick on that hummus so much. And I am picky about my hummus too because I've been to Israel multiple, multiple times and there's
Hmm.
nothing like having like hummus there. So
Hmm.
I can attest it is, and I go there with my Israeli friends. So I can definitely like say that that's
Yep.
definitely a good spot to go. Um, let's see. Rattleback Records because I love vinyls. And have you been?
I don't think I've
No.
been in that. No. Mm-mm.
So it's a cool little record shop, but they buy and sell. So they have used records in there, and I really like getting like old school thing. And it'll have a little label on there that'll tell you if it's like how it plays, so you don't buy it and then get home and the whole thing's
Okay.
scratched and doesn't play or whatever. So Hester, I get too many plants from Hester and
Hmm.
Brown Elephant,
Brown elephant.
Andale or
Classic. Yeah.
Andale. I'm not sure if it's Andale or Andale. I know there's like an internet thing about how to pronounce
Oh.
their name. I'm not
Mm,
sure.
one of
They're like a
those. Yeah, I'm
little
not
sort of
sure.
bodega kind of place, woman owned. Um, so is Hester. Oh my God, I could just keep going. Like, really.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that all the places, like, well, most of the places are local and like small business too. So,
Yeah, it does seem I can't really picture I don't know. I guess there might be like a McDonald's or something up there at some point, right? What's up? There's
Yeah,
some
I mean,
fast food up there, but yeah, for the most part, yeah, for sure. Like
yeah.
95% of it is
So, yeah. I mean, I think the small businesses kind of come together and they want to keep it small business focused.
as they should. I mean, that's the part that's what the whole charm of that neighborhood
Yeah.
is so that's what's so special about it, you know.
Yeah. I'm trying to think like what else? Four-sided for gifts. Like I always find something unique in there. Um, oh, LET. Do you know that place? Is it Eli? I never know how to say things because I don't hear people say the
Oh,
names.
the tea place. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I've been there once or twice. Yeah, their tea menu is just out of this world. It's like
I
everything
know.
you couldn't even imagine how many teas they have. So,
I know. So good. And what I love about it is that it was established as a zero proof like place, like alternative to a bar. So people who
yeah.
don't drink, they still have like open mic nights and they do like they have all of these like
Hmm.
trivia nights and things like that that are happening there. Um,
Yeah.
but they serve tea and they don't have alcohol. And so I think it's a really cool
Hmm.
spot for um, young people if they want to go on like a date night or something like that, or just if you don't feel like drinking. Or I have friends who are zero proof who just don't drink.
Hmm.
Um, so it's a good spot for all that.
That is nice. It would be good to see some more kind of yeah, like alcohol optional alternative kind of things like that. Cause I mean, I feel like Chicago
Yeah.
really is a city that like if you're gonna go out and do things and be alcohol free, this is tough. It's tough to do.
Yeah.
Like
Um,
it would be tough to feel like you're not missing out on something, or
right.
like
It's
it's just
definitely
like
getting
for
better.
eight. Yeah.
Yeah, just from an event like producer perspective, a
Oh
lot
yeah.
more places have zero proof options on their menu that aren't just like whatever that alcohol-free beer, what is that, O'Doul
Hmm.
or like a Shirley Temple. There's a lot of places that have honest, nuanced beverages that are either
Yeah.
mixed or I know there's like hop water is like kind of a
Hmm.
thing that's trending right now. So everywhere from concert venues to restaurants will have some version of hop water or maybe like kombucha or something like that on their menu. So
Yeah.
it's definitely getting better because the movement, I think everybody became alcoholic during the pandemic.
Hmm.
And then like afterwards, people started being like,
Everybody had a
huh.
phase at least.
Yeah, alcohol sales were way up during the pandemic.
Yeah.
And then there was sort of a movement that emerged post pandemic. Well, wouldn't say post because I don't know if we are post. Are we technically? I don't know. But in the last
Mm.
like 2 years, there's been more attention on the zero proof movement, especially since weed is legalized. So
Yep.
yeah, so there's
Hmm.
like
Yeah.
CBD and
Like
THC
it's
beverages, and then there's things that are
right.
alcohol free. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, and I've even seen like alcohol-free spirits.
yeah.
Like gin and tequila, and like it really tastes like gin and tequila, but it doesn't have any alcohol in it somehow. I have not actually tried these but
Yeah,
it's actually produced in Chicago, I believe.
yeah.
Do you know what
There's
I'm
so
talking
many
about?
different brands. Which one? Because there's like I'm trying to
I'll
think of
look
one
it
right
up real
now.
quick.
I know there's several because I have a friend who owns a bar and they've looked into a couple, but they're in Evanston.
Alcohol-free tequila, Chicago. This is quality content right here. It's just me Googling random stuff. Ritual?
Oh yeah,
Ritual
Ritual is one
zero
of the ones.
proof.
Hmm. There's also like I feel like one that starts with an S. I can't think of it right now. Anyway,
I have not been able to confirm whether this was actually is a Chicago base or not. I guess it doesn't have to be still to be cool, but it would be
yeah,
cooler if it was.
yeah.
um, what would you just to kind of pivot a little bit, what would you say the nonprofit world of Chicago has been like
Oh,
operating in that space?
whew. Um, it's been difficult bouncing back from the pandemic. I think when lockdown happened, that was obviously a major shift for all businesses, you know, profit and nonprofit alike. Um, but at the time, one of the organizations that I was working with, we already worked with a vulnerable population in like working with people who deal with cancer. So a lot of our offerings were partially virtual anyway. So we found it wasn't as big of a shift for us. And people were sort of used to seeing that kind of, we obviously ramped it up and offered more things virtually. But for another organization that I work for who works with children and was working in schools and things like that, it was incredibly challenging. And and then on top of that, like budgets and I mean with the cost of everything rising and things like that as we've come out of more restricted lifestyle and gone back to normal, so to speak. I don't even like that. But um
I mean, it's
we're
at least
finding
not, lockdowns and all that stuff going
yeah,
on, like, yeah,
yeah,
we can at least, I think we can safely say we're at least past that stuff, right? Like
right, yeah,
COVID is here forever now.
exactly,
So,
yeah. But
that
in
is
the
what it
event
is. But
space, which I deal with fundraising events. So in the event space in that regard, at first we started doing events tentatively, like carefully in mid to late 2021. And it was like, okay, I think we can start to gather. But of course, there was still a large portion of people who were like, I'm still not comfortable with it. And so numbers were down. And then as 2022 came around, we found that corporations who had typically been like, oh, sure, here's, $50,000 towards your mission and what you're doing and things like that. All of a sudden, it was like we had to cut back and we had to do this. And so we can no longer support, or we can only support at, you know, a quarter of that level or something like that. So it has been a little bit of a struggle. I think there are people who still want to and believe in giving back. And I love working in the area because I've always been the kind of person like I need my work to be meaningful. I need to feel like I'm contributing in some way because there's just a lot of like crappy things in the world. And
mhm.
I feel like if I have to spend most of the hours that I'm living doing something, I really want it to make a difference. That's for me.
Yeah.
So, and everybody has their own approach to that. Some people are like, I can do work that, that doesn't matter to me, but then the money I make from that, I want to contribute to something. So, or whatever
Mhm.
the formula is for each individual. I'm not trying to throw shade, but um,
Sure.
yeah, I think this year, 2023, it has, we've felt it, those losses a little more.
Mhm.
Um, the shifts of companies and corporations specifically, not the individuals necessarily, but more the larger donors and larger gifts that have had to scale back because of their own reasons. And
Mhm.
and then some vendors that we were used to working with, because my focus, the reason why the places that I work with brought me on is because I have a heavy focus in working with local and historically underrepresented business, like people historically underrepresented owners of businesses. I didn't say that
Okay.
right, but hopefully you can fix that. Do you want me to say it again? Businesses.
Historically,
Okay.
business owners who are historically underrepresented. Is
Yes.
that, I don't know. Is that better?
Okay. Let me take another run at that.
We have all the
So
right words. It's just what's the order that they go in.
I know. Um, so the organizations that I work with now brought me on specifically because I have a focus on working with local businesses and also businesses who are owned by historically underrepresented people. So women
Okay.
owned, people of color, LGBTQ community. So that's like my first go-to is to support those. And I was like that prior to the pandemic, but I think it rose up on the radar of a lot of businesses during the pandemic when people realized, oh, these small businesses are just like going out of business after a
Hmm.
very short period of time. So we want to we want to make sure that if we're giving business, we're giving it to the communities that we're in.
Yeah.
So it was sad to see some of our favorite places go away, but I think we've built since coming back, we've built some really great relationships, and I love, like, my roster of people that I enjoy working with are just, like, incredible. So,
Hmm.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely seems like what you mean, like the like business owners and things like that, or other people in the nonprofit space. I guess in both cases.
Yeah, both, but, specifically business owners because we have offices that are like, we have offices downtown, we have with the kids organization, we're working in various neighborhoods where they need us. So, I get to personally, I'm enjoying the Uptown Andersonville, place where I live, but I also get to work with businesses that are, on the South Side and, farther north and, everything in between. So I'm working with businesses that are located all over Chicago because my goal is to always be working with someone local wherever I'm doing, you know, whatever the event might be. So,
Okay, makes sense.
yeah.
Thank you for sharing all that. I guess I'm curious if if certain aspects of what was going on in this is just like a question of curiosity. This isn't being stupid. We can take it out, but um, were certain aspects of what was going on at the throughout the pandemic, like specifically like the civil unrest and Floyd and all that. Did any of that almost play into like your favor in a weird way of like just like more there's more attention being brought to underrepresented peoples, especially particularly people of color, I guess,
Hmm.
in that respect, but maybe
Hmm.
some of that going into different areas too. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah. I did find there was a bit of a scramble, um, because when George Floyd happened, not that that was the first time, I was
Sure.
not only alive, but very, old enough to know when Rodney King and all of that was happening. And it's just, it's a cycle that our country has been through, unfortunately, multiple times. Um, but I think on top of everyone being locked down and there being social media, which um, was not available, you know, in previous larger incidents like that. Um, we were just all staring at the news every day. And I think the scramble with businesses was sort of like an oh shit, like we're looking around and we actually aren't doing a very good job at,
Mm,
at being inclusive. And I do think my focus, because I had been talking about it for a while, I had multiple arguments with multiple places I had worked with about this. And people saying things to me like, well, I mean, we can't have everybody, we can't think about everybody. We just like it was just like statements like that where I'd be like, "Hey, look, there's this business who's owned by, an AAPI like woman, and they do the same thing as this like, white man owned business here. So why not? And they're local, so why not give our business over there?" And it would just be a lot of pushback that I would get. Whereas after George Floyd and a little bit of awareness was raised, there was a little bit less resistance. I
hmm.
mean, there were still some people who were like, okay, we're happy to add like one or two, but that's enough.
Hmm.
So I don't know. It's up to the individuals. I think the people who were already aware, um, were already on that path. And the people who were reluctant about it before were still reluctant about it, but maybe they did a few more things.
Hmm.
I'm grateful for whatever brings people's awareness to being more inclusive in the workplace um, and all of that, and whatever encourages people to grow as
Yeah.
individuals. I think that that's a good thing, but um, I
You
just
hope next
hesitate.
time it doesn't. You hope next time it doesn't have to come from
Yeah,
such a tragic, awful
exactly,
thing. But
exactly.
sometimes that is what it takes.
Yeah, yeah. But I mean, I will say I mean, I know this isn't what the podcast is about, but on the other side of that is being a woman of color in the room while all that is going on in the world.
Mm,
And now all of a sudden, all the questions and everything gets passed through you. And you're
mm,
like, I don't speak for everyone. You know what I mean? Like
mm,
it did become exhausting to a point where I had to disengage. I've had people who I hadn't spoken to in 20 something years reaching out to me being like, I'm not a racist, right? I mean, you know that. And I'm like, I don't know you anymore. Like, I'm not here
mhm,
to validate, like,
mhm.
and they give me this, like, I did this and this and this. And I'm just like, it's not my job to, like, how you're doing in
Yeah.
the race category. I don't know. So there's two parts to it. Like, on one part, I did feel like I could speak up about things and it wasn't shocking to people because they were seeing it other places. And on the other hand, I also didn't want to be the person everyone went to talk about it all the time
Yeah.
because it's like
Yeah.
exhausting. So,
Yeah, and you might have even seen that on like those like kind of corporate levels, where it's like now all of a sudden they're so far overreacting to the other side. They're like on the other side of the spectrum from where they were so much, and now it's just disingenuous, and it's like
right.
clear that they're just
The
trying to
performative, yeah,
catch the wave.
right.
Yeah,
Became
interesting.
trendy. People
Yeah.
who added roles like chief diversity officer, and then those roles were eliminated 2 years later, things like that.
Hmm.
And it's just like, it's performative. So you just, for me, I'm just like, I'm going to keep doing what I've been doing. I'm going to keep talking about it. And the people, like I said, the people who care will continue on their growth path. And the people who never really cared will do themselves in whatever way they usually do them. I don't
Hmm.
know.
Right. Either way, it's not up to you.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. How would you say the neighborhood that you live in and just Chicago in general has influenced your own personal, professional, and creative endeavors,
Oh,
if at all?
well, personally, I think, like I said earlier, I am a firm believer that there is an energetic match for every human being on this planet. I know that not everyone gets a chance to explore that opportunity, but I have seen it so many times. Like there was someone that I knew, a kid that I used to teach dance to, who just really struggled, it seemed, in every aspect of his life. And then we did this summer trip for dance and music. He was on the music side. Um, and we went to Denmark, and he was like a whole different person. Fast forward, graduates high school, does some college, ends up moving to Denmark, getting married there, has a family there, is like just a different person. Another person I knew who is still in the music scene, same thing, except it was Australia. Like, just I've seen it happen with so many people and stateside as well.
Hmm.
So I think for me personally, having been a lot of different places, like Chicago just feels like a match for me. I feel, it's hard to describe because it's one of those feelings where you only recognize it in the relief from it, if that makes sense. So I will give a tangible example. So the place I was living outside of Detroit area was a little more rural, it was like an hour outside of Detroit. I was reminded on a regular basis that I was the only person of color in the whole neighborhood. And um, not necessarily in like malicious ways, but just again, like it's nice to just not be noticed. Like I just want to move around. I don't want people to point out and be like, "Oh yes, I remember you because you're the one with the brown skin." Like I don't need to hear that.
Hmm.
So I am a fan of graphic t-shirts and um like a good graphic tee that just says like woman on it or whatever. I love doing that and throwing a blazer over it. That's like part of my aesthetic. Anyway, so I have this shirt that says equality. I think I made a donation to an organization and got it, and it just says equality. And part of the tee has like a little rainbow in it. And
Hmm.
it's very simple, but I threw it on went over to the post office because the place I was living, you had to like go there to pick up your mail, but it was like walking distance. So on my way, a couple of people decided to just randomly passing me by make a comment about my shirt. Oh, are you gay? Like, just it literally says equality. So it's not like, yay, gay people or lesbian or I don't know. Like,
Hmm.
it wasn't a label. It was, anyway, it was very annoying.
Hmm.
And I found like that I would double check what I was wearing before I strolled out the door for something as simple as going to get the mail, you know? And then I moved back to Chicago and had been here for a few months, wasn't thinking about it, had the same shirt on and walked around the corner to the post office to mail something. And two guys that were walking and passed me said, "Oh, I like your shirt." And I looked down and realized like it was the same shirt that I had gotten heckled in
Hmm.
before. And
Hmm.
I say that to say not that like, oh, I need encouragement about what I'm wearing, but what I really noticed was that I didn't think about what I was wearing before I left the house. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
that's where the relief of not being stressed, like, oh, what does my shirt say before I leave the house? You know? Um, sorry, that's my clock. Can you hear that?
No.
Oh, okay. Um,
No, you're fine.
We have a Santa clock, so it was just like ho ho hoing. I didn't know if you could.
No, no. Yeah, I couldn't hear it.
Okay.
No big
So
deal. Thanks.
anyway, I think the relief from the stress of worrying about being so visible
Yeah.
in an area where I'm such a minority is a huge mental health benefit to me
Hmm.
personally, where I can walk out the house and not worry about what I'm wearing, and I can, or what my T-shirt says, I should say, and and then professionally, I find that the team that I'm working with here versus some of the teams I was working with at nonprofits in that area are vastly different. I do not get the comments or harassment or and I'm not going to go into like some really horrible stories of times where people said really ignorant things to me in the workplace in front of other people and then my boss talked to me about it and said, "Listen, this person now is worried that you think they're a racist. If you could just go up and let them know you don't think that." And I'm like, "Well, they said a very racist thing to me just now." So, you know,
Hmm.
and I wasn't going around calling people that. I would just be like, "That's not appropriate to say." And then I would get disciplined, for saying that. So the difference being that the team I'm working with now, Chicago, just it doesn't, I guess I don't want to say that, but in my experience, I don't find that the majority of people or I find that the majority of people are more inclusive and more aware of how they interact with their coworkers
Hmm.
than I was finding in other places. So,
Yeah. Maybe
so I
like a more
just,
empathetic default mode, in a way, or just
yeah,
yeah, something along those lines. Hmm.
yeah, I feel like I can be more of myself in every aspect, personal and professional life. And that's just, like I said, it's just a huge relief. It's extra energy of like, I don't have to shield
Yeah.
up every time I drive into my workplace, things like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. That's if that's not a vote of confidence for a place, and like it can
Yeah,
make you feel that way when you haven't felt that way in other situations. And
yeah.
yeah, I don't know what it is. That's great. So I guess this bottom line, like who would you say that your neighborhood is ideal for? Why should
Ooh,
somebody move there over maybe some other options?
um, that's a good question too. I, I hate to be like really broad, but I feel like it's good for families or like single folks. There's like stuff to do for either or.
Hmm.
Yeah. Um, obviously like very diverse. I live right near Asia and Argyle too.
Hmm.
So there's like the Lunar New Year and things like that. And there's always like really fun things happening there with that community. There's, like I've said, the Andersonville being very LGBTQ friendly. Uptown is very friendly to like people of color. So this particular corner, you know, this edge that I'm
Hmm.
living on is is friendly to like a very broad range of people and their lifestyles and stuff. I mean, I have kids too. They're older, but I also have a grandbaby and
Mm.
they live with me. And so I'm always like, oh, hey, like we can go do this. We love to like walk in Andersonville all together. And there's lots of strollers and things like that around. It's hugely dog friendly area. So if you like dogs, it's a great place for that.
Hmm.
But then I also do see like couples walking around, without kids and stuff and doing their thing. So um, I wouldn't say like I know there are other neighborhoods that are very family focused or others that are very much more like not kids
Hmm.
focused, But this one
Yeah.
I think it kind of is for both.
Are your kids of the age, were they going to Chicago schools for the most part, or was most of that when you were in the Detroit area? Probably.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Because I know, yeah, I've talked to a couple people about, obviously like Emma and I don't have kids yet, so I like the whole how the school system in Chicago works is like a pretty big blind spot of mine. I know
Yeah.
can be very difficult to navigate, so I wasn't sure if you
Yeah, we didn't
had
have to do
to
that.
do all that. That's good.
Yeah. I know it is though. What I do appreciate though is that them just using public transit. I think that's an important skill to learn, like navigating your way around.
Yeah.
But again, they're older, so it's not as much of a
Right.
concern as it might be if you
Yeah.
had younger kids. Yeah.
Yeah, I have wondered that. Like, what do you think is like the right age to start being like, all right, you're old enough to go get on the red line by yourself,
I
like
know. I don't know. It's so
I would be
scary, right?
petrified as
I
a
know.
yeah, I'd be petrified as a parent.
It's still
I'm going to be
scary
a
and I'm a
helicopter
grown up.
parent. I already know it. I'm going to be such a micromanaging parent, and I was so like not raised that way. Like my parents just let me do whatever I wanted, and it worked out. But
Yeah,
I feel like we always like overreact to however we were raised. You know,
very true. Very
so
true.
I think that's going to be me.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. It's scary for me sometimes and I'm an adult, so um but I know
Yeah.
like there's public school kids who take the bus every day to school, like the regular bus, not the school bus, you know what I
Hmm.
mean? Yeah, just take the
Yeah.
regular bus to school. So like I guess yeah, it's individual.
Yeah. Makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, awesome. This is are there any other, before we kind of close out like the neighborhood city portion of our conversation, and obviously we jumped around bunch of stuff in between, but are there any thoughts on any of that you want to get out, or questions I should have asked?
Hmm. No, I don't think so. I think I talked about a lot of my faves. So yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Anything you'd like to highlight or promote, or just in general, that you want people to know about, either about yourself, ways to get a hold of you if that's relevant, or just
Yeah.
things around the city, anything.
Yeah, I will say that the two main organizations that I work with, one is called Twist Out Cancer, and we work with those who've been affected by cancer using arts programming in various different forms. So if anyone is a survivor, previvor, or caregiver of someone who was diagnosed, please feel free to reach out, August at twistoutcancer.org. Um, so yeah, and then the other organization I work with is Big Brothers Big Sisters in Chicago, and they've been around for 108 years, so most people know who they are.
Hmm.
um,
Yeah, I might have heard of them.
yeah, so I'm very happy to be able to contribute to a new generation of young people through that organization as well.
Excellent. All right, August, thank you so much for
Yeah,
giving us your time here. I know our
thanks for
audience will
having me.
definitely get a lot out of this.
Thank you so
Absolutely.
much for having me. I love talking about Chicago, and when people come into town, I'm always like, okay, what do you want to do? Do you want to turn up? Do you want to chill out? Do you have like kids with you? Like literally, you could visit Chicago probably 8 times and do completely different things. You know what I mean?
Oh,
And
you could live in
and I'm not even.
Chicago for your whole life and do different, a whole day of different things every day. I mean, yeah,
I
it's
know.
endless.
And I'm not
Yeah.
even talking about Michigan Avenue or all that stuff. Like
Uh-huh.
that's I don't even include that. I'm just talking about neighborhood stuff. Like it's endless things to do.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, I brought this up on a few different episodes by now. If the audience is listening to every episode, they're probably tired of me bringing it up. But there's this guy, and if I'm gonna keep bringing this guy up, I need to actually get to know like what is his Instagram handle. Hey, it's a guy on Instagram. I'm just gonna look it up. It's like Chicago food. I don't know. That's gonna take too long.
Okay.
But it's this guy. He goes around and his goal is to eat cuisine from every country in the world without leaving the Chicagoland area. And I think he does
Oh,
have to venture into the suburbs every once in a while, but like, yeah, like
wow.
that's just like you can do that here, and that's just crazy.
Yeah.
You know?
I'm a huge foodie, so I go most places for the food. So that sounds
Mm-hmm.
pretty awesome.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah. Oh my God, now you have me
All
thinking.
right.
I'm like, oh yeah, there's Cuban and there's like I'm
Oh
going down
yeah,
the
everything. Yeah, we went to a Filipino place last night. That was really good. I mean, we're over here in
um,
Albany Park, so super
yeah,
diverse neighborhood. There's all kinds of stuff over here, and
yeah.
we haven't even hit the tip of the iceberg with all the different types of cuisines there are over here. Persian. There's a couple really
Yeah.
famous Persian restaurants over here, and like Cambodian. I mean, there's this.
Oh,
It goes on and on.
yeah.
There's a
Yeah.
Kazakhstan, like
Oh
a
yeah.
Kazakhstani. Yeah.
There
Yeah, that's an
is?
interesting one. It's kind of like a combination. It's like Arzon Cafe. It's like a combination. The food there is like it's like a little bit Middle Eastern, but with sort of like Chinese and Russian influences on it.
Yeah. That is
It's
so
really
funny.
interesting. It's pretty cool.
I didn't even know that that country existed. I met someone, ironically, in Israel, um,
Hmm.
who was traveling, who was from Kazakhstan. And then I looked on the map and I was like, it's massive. Like, how did
Yeah,
I know? I'm
it's a
pretty
big
good with
place.
geography. I'm like the person who
Uh
people
huh.
put on geography at like trivia things. And I can't believe I just like missed that one. But um, that's cool. You'll have to send me that because I would like to go.
Okay. Yeah. It's just right down the street from us. So hey, if you ever
Yeah.
come over and hang out, we'll
Well,
just
meet
walk
up.
down there. It's like
Yeah.
10,
Yeah.
10
Yeah.
minute walk. Yeah.
Awesome. Cool.
August, thank you so much for all your time and for sharing everything that you shared.
Thank you for having me.